Hello, I'm David Kelley, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Competitive. Today I'm going to talk about tournament structure and why it matters. We're going to go over a few different things involving tournament structures, but to start off, we're just going to look at the rules they give us for tournaments. So, if you're playing a local store tournament, more than likely there's going to be no cut, because you're going to be using the basic rule or the basic structure, and I know very few stores that get more than 16 players for a monthly tournament. If you're one of those stores, kudos, I'm jealous. If you're not, join the rest of us. So, for these tournaments, you're going to have one person essentially go undefeated, they win, end of story. So for just your regular monthly tournament, your only goal is win. Simple enough. Nothing else to it. You're just trying to win. Now, where it starts getting interesting and where your list decisions can start to have an impact is when we start talking about the larger scale tournaments. So hyperspace trials, or what used to be called regionals, grand championships, system opens, and worlds. So depending on how the cut is designed depends on what kind of list you may or may not want to take. So the first thing I want to look at is system opens and worlds, because honestly that's my favorite format, and I like building lists for that format. So at the system opens, it's going to be 6 rounds. If you go 5-1, you make the cut, easy peasy. At worlds this year, if you went 5-2 or better, you make the cut, easy peasy. That's it. You know, going into the tournament, I have to win this many games. If I do, I get to play on the second day. That's awesome. So in those settings, in those situations, your list doesn't really matter as long as it wins. So you care nothing about how much MOV you give up. You care nothing about whether your games are all tight, whether you're completely killing the opponent, whether all your games are going to time. None of that matters as long as you're winning. Now, I will say, if you have a list that can kill the opponent quickly and you can save a little time, maybe all your games are ending in 55 minutes, man, that's a lot of extra time for you to just sit back and relax. That's nice. But as far as the tournament structure goes, who cares? It plays no part into it. So, I am a huge fan of system opens and worlds for the simple fact that they say, get this many wins, you're in. End of story. I enjoy that because it takes all the extra crap that you got to think about lists out of the equation, and it comes down to, can I win with this list? Now, where you want to start considering your list choice is going to be the Grand Championship. I believe all the Grand Champs that I've heard of, at least in the U.S., are run similar to this. And then Hyperspace Trials or Regionals. So normally your Hyperspace Trials and Regionals are going to run some sort of advanced structure, or like the Nova Open did this year, they just said top 32 from each day make the cut. We're going to have a top 64, end of story. So the first thing we're going to do is look at a Hyperspace Trial. Now, I'm going to be using something called Top Cut Calculator right here. And what this does is it lets me put the number of players are playing, the number of rounds we're going to play, and what the cut will be. Then we're going to hit this handy-dandy button and find out what we need to do to make the cut. Now, we're going to use the numbers I have in here already. But if we look here, if we have 108 players in our tournament, it's going to be a cut to top 16 with 6 rounds. Now, 108 players is a fairly large hyperspace. However, I'm from Virginia, and when I go up to games and stuff for the last 4 years, I think we've been 95 people, 98 people, 120 people, and 112 people. So this is a standard sized regional for the local area. If your regional is smaller, do it smaller. But I'm going to look at 108 players because I think it's an interesting number. So, 6 rounds, top 16, 108. Will I make the cut? So, These results look funny. So it's 6-0s. There's going to be 1.7 players going 6-0. What this actually means is there's a guaranteed one person that will be undefeated. However, there's going to be an odd number of undefeateds as we go through the cut. So there's going to be an undefeated player playing down into a one-loss player. So because we don't know if the undefeated player will win or if the one-loss player will beat the undefeated player, they can't make a solid prediction on it'll be 1 or 2. So it's going to be 1.7. What that means is more often than not, there's going to be 2 undefeateds. Same thing is true here with the 5-1s. It's 10.1. So more likely than not, it's going to be just 10 5-1s. Now, the part that really starts mattering is here. So 1.2 players are going to make it at 4-2. So, or 4.2 players. So essentially, 4 players out of the 25 4-2s in this tournament are going to make the cut. This is where your list choice starts kind of making a difference. If you're going to a tournament and you know it's purely based on the advanced structure and your MOV could play a role, if I've got 2 lists that I'm equally good with, say I've played 50 games with list X and 50 games with list Y, I've got a 60% win rate with both. All right? If list X gives up more MOV than list Y, I probably want to take list Y. Because by taking the list that gives me a higher MOV score every round, I improve my chances of being in this 4-2 or in this 4.2 players that'll make the cut at 4-2. Now, if, however, I'm playing a list, I've got 2 lists, I've played them both a lot, and list X I've got an 80% win rate with, and list Y I've got a 65% win rate with. The reality is there, I'm still probably just going to take list X regardless, because 80% is a lot better than 65%. Even if all of my games are super close with list X. Say I'm winning 120 to 80, 152 to 105, 130 to 120. Like, those are the wins you're getting. They're not very convincing, but you're winning at a much higher rate. Whereas with list Y, when I win, it's like 200 to 40, 200 to 82, 150 to 25, 190 or 180, I guess, could be an actual score, 180 to 25. Like, when you win with that list, you dominate. The problem is you just lose a lot. So, in that case, with only the 4 players making it here, I'm probably just going to side with the list with the better win percent. And this matters a lot because in the cut, once you make the cut, you need to keep winning. So the only time I really want to even consider MOV as my list choice is when I've got 2 lists that are very similar in their win percents. So if I've got one list, I play 50 games with it and I win 38 of them. I've got another list, I played 50 games with it and I won 37. But my MOV with the 37 win list was so much higher. I was averaging, 320 MOV per game rather than the 290 I was averaging with the list with 38 wins. If that's the case, if I'm going to a tournament where I know 4-2s are going to make it, I may lean towards a 4-2 list. Or towards a list that maybe I lose 1 or 2 percentage points on my win rate, but has a much better MOV. Because, remember, we're doing this to be competitive. If you don't make the cut, it's kind of hard to say you were competitive in that tournament. Now, if you missed the cut by 1 spot, okay, you were competitive, you were there. But if you're missing cut after cut after cut, it might just be maybe you're giving up too much MOV. Maybe if you really looked at your lists and were like, man, if I just switched to this list, which I'm almost as good with, but it preserves so much MOV and points, maybe that'll make the difference between missing the cut by 30 MOV and making it by 110. So those are things to consider when you're talking about making the cut. So Just keep that in mind. Now, we looked at a large tournament. Now I want to look at a small one with a top 16 cut. So let's go with 82 players. So still going to be 6 rounds, but I want to reduce this to 82 players and go. Now, 19 players are going to go 4-2, but 7 of them are going to make the cut. This is a tournament where all of a sudden your MOV is incredibly important, right? Because making the cut's the goal. Like, your first goal is going to be to make the cut. Once you're consistently making cuts, then we got to start looking at, all right, now I need to win in these cuts. But if you're consistently making the cuts time and time and time again, you will probably be winning in the cuts also. Not all the games, but you'll probably win a certain percentage of them. So here, 7 players are going to make the cut out of 19. That's over a third, right around, what, 38%, something like that? That's a lot. So here, I would really consider bringing in an MOV list. If I had 2 lists and I had, like, say, an 85% win rate with one and an 80% win rate with the other, I may lean towards that 80% win rate. For just to guarantee I make the cut, if the 80% win rate significantly has a higher MOV. I mean, that's just a choice you're going to have to make. Now, the reality is, me personally, I stopped caring about MOV a while ago and just started focusing on winning, and that's helped me. But if you're not at the stage where going 5-1 is a consistent thing you do, this is something you need to be thinking about. Because this is something the first year or so I played, I did think about, and it got me in those cuts and playing against those good players, and it provided that practice I needed. Because one thing a lot of people don't realize, if you don't play against the best players, you don't get that practice. Practicing against good players makes you a better player. So if you never see the cut, if you never get to feel what it's like to be there, when you finally do get there, you're just going to get destroyed the first couple times. Probably. There's always going to be that one miracle kid that makes the cut and then just rides off to glory. But that's not the average person. So really think about, if you're in a tournament where you know there's going to be some 4-2s that are going to make the cut, that's where we really got to start considering MOV. Now, another little section I wanted to add on into this video is why winning a tournament is so ridiculously hard. So, I'm actually going to pull up a calculator. Calculator. The reason I'm doing this is these are all nice. We know in some tournaments MOV matters, in System Opens it doesn't matter. And I really like System Opens because I don't care about MOV. I never want that to enter my thought process of winning a tournament. I want it to purely be on, I want to take the best possible list with the best possible win percent. Now, I want to look at Nova Open, which is a Grand Champ I went to and won. And then I want to look at your normal, say, top 16 cut tournament. So let's imagine we have just played a hyperspace trial with 100 players. We're in the top 16, and we're like, yes, I'm here. Now I got to win a game, and I get dice. Well, I guess you get dice for top 16 now. I win a game, I get templates. If I win another game, I'm top 4. One more, and I'm in the final. All right, we could do this. And I don't think a lot of people truly understand why it's so hard to win. So the simplest way to look at this is, if you're in the cut and everyone that makes the cut is the same ability, right? You're all the same level of player. Each game, you have a 0.5% chance of winning if you're all the same. And if it's a top 16, you're going to play 4 games to win that tournament. Well, that means you only have a 6% chance of winning the tournament. 6.25% if everyone is the same. All right? That means just making the cut, you're still not likely to win. Even if you are an average player in that cut. Like, say you're the 8 seed. You're just 6% to win the tournament. That's really hard to win. Now, say we make the Nova Open final, or the Nova Open cut, where it was a top 64. Right now it's a 0.5 to the 6th power, because you got to win 6 games. Wow, 1.5% chance. So, if I was the same as everyone else at the Nova Open, I only had a 1.5% chance of winning that tournament once I made the cut. That is insanely low. And that's why to win a major tournament, you need 2 factors. One, you got to be a good player. You cannot win a major tournament without being a good player. End of story. 2, you got to get lucky. I won the Nova Open. That's great. 2 things happened there. I was a good player. I got lucky. Now, the luck part can manifest itself in a lot of ways. I didn't hit the 5 blankouts on defense with Echo in any game where it mattered. That happened. That never happened to me. Cool. I got past that thing. I never hit a hard counter. I was scared of droid swarms because while I knew how to beat them, it was like a 60-40 gamble for me. And I don't want to go into a 60-40 game. So that was a luck factor. I just never hit that. And then I didn't hit anything I didn't know how to handle. So I got lucky in those regards. The actual games themselves, I was pretty confident in all my matchups. So cool. But the reality is there's a lot of luck and skill that go into just winning a major tournament. Now, that's assuming we're all the same. Now, in the last year, I've played 2 System Opens, Nova Open, and Worlds. So I only want to look at my cut games because we're going to redo this calculation, but using my actual win percent. So the first System Open I went to, I had a play-in. I won the top 16 game, and then I lost in the top 8. So I went 2-1. The next System Open, I won the play-in game, and then I lost in the top 16, so I went 1-1. The Nova Open, I won all 6 games, so I went 6-0. And then at Worlds, I won 64, 32, and lost in top 16, so I went 2-1. So I ended up winning 2, 6 is 8, plus 1 is 9, plus 2 is 11. So in those 4 major tournaments in the cut, excuse me, I won 11 out of 14 games I played. So I have a 78.5% win rate in the cut. So let's assume every game I play in a cut, I'm a 78.5% favorite. That's probably not true, but over the course of time, it probably is true because I've been doing it. And I've consistently about played at this level in cuts and whatnot. So we're going to assume this is my actual average win rate. Now, if I run into Duncan Howard, maybe it drops down to 50-50. Maybe it drops down to 45 me, 55 him. If I hit Paul, maybe it drops down, right? Because that is part of that luck factor of getting there. If I'm hitting a guy in round 4 or the top 16, that it's the first tournament he's gotten to the top 16 of a major tournament, you know what? My win rate's probably 85-90% there. Why? He's nervous. He's never been in this position. I've been in this position many times. I'm perfectly comfortable. I'm sitting there going, how am I going to kill this guy? This guy's looking at me going, I remember David. I've played him before. God, I'm in the top 16. This is amazing. He's not thinking about the game. I'm thinking about crushing him, right? So a lot of these things come into play, and we're going to talk about this in a later date, but I will mention the first time I played a player who I knew was Jeremy Howard. I don't mind throwing this name out there because it's a kudos to him. Jeremy Howard was the first big-name star player that I ever played in real life that I was like, oh, shit, I know who you are. And what happened in that game was I had a list that hard countered his. I had designed my list. It was Soontir, Vader, and a PS1 Defender. And this was back in the Palp Aces days. And he was running Palp Aces. He had Omega Leader, something else, and Palp. I don't remember his other ship. Well, and the reason my list hard countered Palp Aces is because my defender I would charge with, and I almost always traded my defender for their shuttle. The problem with that for them was my defender was 28 points, their shuttle was 29. So if I made that trade effectively, I was way ahead, and my two aces at 6 moved after theirs because I got to choose the bid, and I had better aces than them. So I very much hard countered that list, and that's why I took it to the tournament. We opened that game up. I killed a shuttle, just annihilated it, took no damage. And I was like, oh, this Jeremy guy, he's nothing. I got this. And then all of a sudden, that cockiness got in there, because I was nervous as crap when I first saw Jeremy. I was like, oh, shit, he's just going to kill me. And then I handled my nerves. I reined him in. I executed the first couple turns amazingly well, murdered his shuttle, took no damage, and was like, I'm on top of the world. I got this. Got overconfident. 2 turns later, lost Vader. Next turn, lost the defender, and now it's just Soontir versus 2 aces. And I was like, oh, crap, I just blew it. And then I lost. And it was because I was nervous, then I was overconfident, then I was nervous again, and I was on an emotional roller coaster because it was the first time I was in the cut. So that's going to play a factor when you get into the cut of these major tournaments, especially the first time you get there. Because I will tell you, the first System Open I got to the cut in, the very first game, I was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Because it was the biggest tournament I'd ever played where I did it. It was the first time I proved it to myself and other people, I guess. But it was the first time I was like, I can do this. And I won that game. Don't know how, but I won the first game. And then I won the second game. And then some Canadian guy murdered me in the top 8, and it was, he played very well. But, yeah, so getting back to this. I have a 78.5% chance to win each of my cut games. So we're going to use this. And we're going to say, now I've got to win 4 games at, say, a hyperspace trial. What are my odds of winning that tournament? Only 38%. Now, I want you to think about this. I have a 78% chance of winning every single game I'm going to play. And I'm only 38% to win that tournament. That's interesting, right? I am the definitive favorite in every game I play, and I'm only 38% to win. Now let's assume Duncan, Howard, Paul Heaver, Chris Allen, Cam, who beat me, any of these large name players, or any of these players that are just as good or better than me. I hit one of them. Now all of a sudden, I'm not 78% to win each one. Because the reality is, overall I'm 78%, but that number is going to go up and down. So in a real tournament, let's say round of 16, I get somebody in its first game, 90% to win. The next game, I get someone that's been there a few times, but I'm the better player, right? Now I'm at 79% to win. That's the top 8. Now I'm in the top 4. In the top 4, I don't get a crazy, insanely good player. I don't get a Duncan Howard or Paul Heaver, but I get a very good player, right? Now my odds go to 65%. And then in that final, you know what? I run into Duncan Howard, and my odds drop to 48%, right? He's got a slight edge on me. Now, I'm only 22% to win that tournament. My overall average is 78%, but I'm only 22%. That's insanely difficult to win. Even if you're the best player in the field, it becomes hard to win. Now, I'm a 78% winner rate in the cut. Let's assume a player like Duncan is 84%, right? At that same tournament, he's going to be 0.84 to the 4th. He's only 50% to win with an 84% win rate if he's got to go from the top 16 on. Now, we looked earlier in the System Opens, 1.5% chance to win a top 64 if you're an average player. Let's assume I put my 0.78 in there. Now I got to win 6 rounds. I'm only 22% to win that with a 78% win rate. But the reality is, that top 64, I'm not there. Especially if we look at Worlds. Like, at Worlds, let's see. The first round, maybe I'm a 85%, right? Because I was the 5 seed, so I got paired against someone that just barely made it into the tournament. Then top 32, let's say it drops down to 0.8. And let's say I get a very nice curve, right? I get the perfect curve. So top 16, I'm a 75%. Top 8, 70%. Top 4, now all of a sudden it drops off hard. I'm only a 60%. And then in that final, let's just say we're both the same. And all of a sudden, I'm only 10% to win. And that is assuming I am one of the best players at the tournament. I only have a 10% chance to get through 6 rounds. So this number here probably isn't for me, right? This is probably your Duncans, your Pauls who did it 3 years in a row. This is your insanely top-tier level players, and they're looking at 10% win chances to win the tournament once they make the cut, assuming insanely large advantages. The reality is, most of us, even me, like I would say I'm probably around a 65% to win each game I play. I think for me, winning the Nova Open was I was at that base 65% win rate, but I added an extra like 15% to boost me to like 80. Purely because I had Echo in my list. Most players did not have the practice or experience to know what to do against her, and that just pushed me over the top. I have a feeling that's what actually happened there. And that goes to the list building aspect, which I'm going to talk about in another video. So we already talked about how to pick a meta list, but I'm going to, in the future, talk about how to build a list. But I think that's probably how I got through. But, I mean, I just want to put out there why it's so difficult to win. I mean, even getting to a top 16, a top 8 of these large tournaments where you're playing in a top 64 is insanely difficult. Insanely difficult. Which is why making the cuts are important. Because for every 3, 4, 5 cuts you make, you're only going to hit those top 8s so much. Those top 4s, those wins. Even if you're the best player in the world, you're only going to win so much. And that's why I say, if you look at Duncan and Paul, like they're some of the winningest players this game has ever seen. And the reality is, they don't win everything they play. Now, Duncan won like 3 or 4 hyperspace trials in a row, which is amazing. Paul won 3 worlds in a row. That is just mind-boggling. But now, especially as the community has caught up to their skill levels a little bit, like you're seeing a lot of these major tournament wins like fall off. We're not seeing a ton of people win 2 majors in the same year. We're seeing a lot of people make high cuts in the same year, but like winning those 2 majors, I know a couple people have done it, but it's not a common theme because it's just so hard to produce in the cut in that single elimination format game after game after game. And I know a lot of this video has been just kind of looking at some numbers and explaining things, but the purpose of that, and if you're still with me here, awesome, thanks for watching this long. But the purpose is, along with the purpose of some of the early math videos, just to show the actual raw numbers behind what a top 64 looks like, what a top 16 looks like, why it's so hard to win. Because I know players that make cuts very consistently. They make the cut, and then they lose. They make the cut, they win a game, they lose. They make the cut, they win 2 games, they lose. And the reality is, that's not uncommon. If you're just making the cut solidly, but you're not like a huge advantage over the field, it's so difficult to get that win. To spike that, 1.5% victory chance. I mean, we just looked. This is me having a major advantage in every game but the final, and only 10%. Like, and let's be real, I probably don't have those win odds in most games I play in the cut. So that's me overestimating, and I'm only 10% to win. That's crazy. So I guess the biggest thing is once you get a list and you're like, I am confident this list will do well in this tournament, I am confident in the format, I'm confident that I've got the meta figured out, then you got to go and play. And even if you do basically everything right, you got to play well and you got to have a little luck. And then you just got to beat the odds. And that can be a very difficult thing. So you got to manage those expectations, which is why I'm looking at like a top 16, another top 16, a top 8, and a win going. I had an insanely good season. I am so happy with how it went. Could it have gone better? Sure. Could it have gone way worse? Absolutely it could have. Holy cow. I very easily could have scrubbed out first round of the cut every tournament. In fact, that's probably more likely an event than what actually occurred. So, just kind of manage those expectations. Please leave a comment in the video if you watch this way, all the way. If you watch this far into the video, please leave a comment and just tell me if you thought this video was helpful. Because this is the type of video that I think the information is important to know, and a lot of players don't realize, but I don't know if people care. So if you get this far, please leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode.